Hello and happy Friday, Sweet 16 Friday here in the Boilermaker Lounge. I am Sam Sprunger. I'm joined by Grant Flora. Grant, it is the day where we get back at it, and the Boilers are still playing.
They are. It's going to be a fun one tonight, but just for Purdue to be in this matchup, I think says a lot. And now they get to come back home to Indy, and we're going to see what happens. It should be a fun environment out there at Lucas Oil.
Yeah, the Boilers have played 3 total games in Indianapolis this season. Now they were all at Gainbridge, but they did have played. They're 1-2. They lost to Texas A&M and they beat USC and lost to Michigan in the Big Ten tournament earlier this season. But having gone through the trials and tribulations that they have to this point, I would take a home crowd over playing in Dallas
Oh yeah,
against these
for
guys.
sure.
Let's talk about the game. It's scheduled as one of the two last ones today. Um, uh, Texas Tech and Arkansas, and then Purdue and Houston are both scheduled to tip off at 10:09. Ridiculous times. At least with Texas Tech and Arkansas, they're at least more west, so it makes it a little bit earlier. But Dustin Schutte said that the SID, Chris Foreman at Purdue, doesn't anticipate them even getting close to 10:09 as a starter. It's going to be almost guaranteed later. What do you think about that aspect of it? It's going to be on True TV and TNT, or TNT tonight at 10:09 scheduled tip time. What are your thoughts about such a late start? Does that affect Purdue or Houston in either way?
It'll be interesting because Houston comes from a central time zone, really it should feel more like 9:09 for them, which might feel a little more normal. But at the same time, I don't really think it's going to be an advantage for one team over another. I mean, they're both going to be playing late,
Yeah.
and it's adrenaline. It's NCAA tournament. They're not going to feel tired. I don't think. I think it's going to be um, relatively normal, even though it is later than at least what Purdue is used to. But at the same time, Purdue had to play out in the West Coast a couple times where they had some later starts, so they've done it before. I don't think it will end up being the reason anybody wins or loses. It's unfortunate for us as fans and for, I'm
Right.
sure, some people even in the arena, like the media and whatnot. But overall, I don't think that it's going to be a major factor in the outcome of this game.
Well, I sent you something the other day about Braden Smith, and in early games, meaning they start before 5 p.m., he averages 11 points, 2.3 assist to turnover ratio, 35% 3-point shooting, and 35.5% field goal shooting. Games after a 6 o'clock start time, so late game, he averages 18 and a half, 3.3 to assist to turnover, 41.5 for threes, and 47.8 for field goals. Does this give you a thought that Braden Smith might play a little bit more of a factor into the outcome of this game because of the later start?
It could. I mean, it could be something where Braden's just a little more locked in later in the day, and sometimes just those matinees, if you will, can kind of feel a little bit just weird having to play in the afternoon when you play
Yeah.
so often at night. So it definitely could, but I think regardless, Braden's going to come ready to play because this is a really tough Houston team, and Braden has got to play well, not just as far as passing the ball. He's got to be able to score the ball. He's got to be able to play good defense. This entire Purdue team has to step up and play their best basketball of the season.
Well, the Cougars come in. I don't have 32-4 overall, the 1 seed in the Midwest. Purdue is over against 1 seeds in its history against 1 seeds in the tournament. What gives us hope that Purdue is going to get over that hump and maybe pull off the unimaginable, and be the team that people are looking at like, wow, they're the surprise of the Elite Eight?
Yeah, well, for one thing, like we talked about, it's in Indy, which means this crowd is going to be much in favor of Purdue. And my hope would be that assuming Purdue can keep it close throughout the game, which is going to be critical. I think if Purdue gets in a hole
Yeah.
early, they're really in trouble. And some of those Kentucky and Tennessee fans start to hang around. I think they'll also jump in on Purdue's side if they're still in the game.
You think Tennessee's going to root for Purdue?
I only say that because if you're Kentucky or Tennessee, you do not want to play Houston, in my opinion. You look at a Purdue team, even if they do find a way to beat Houston, they look a lot more beatable in that Elite Eight matchup than Houston does. And so, yeah, obviously Tennessee fans might be a little more hesitant, but I honestly feel that way. And I was listening to some podcasts too, and they're kind of on the same boat as me. But I think they'll definitely have a crowd advantage, even if it's just the Kentucky fans. The Tennessee fans just decide not to partake. But I do think, regardless, they're going to have a crowd advantage, and if they can stay in the game, that will definitely help fuel them. And again, we're talking about a Purdue team that now is playing as an underdog for the first time in the NCAA tournament in a long time. I mean, you could argue that the UConn game last year for the championship, they were slight underdogs, but really it was just an even matchup between two heavyweights. Now they are certainly the underdogs, and they're coming in ready to ruin the dreams of the Houston Cougars. And I think Purdue, when you have guys like Braden Smith and Fletcher Lawyer that can pop off at any time, you have a big and Trey Kaufman-Wren. If they play their best basketball, they can come out and surprise Houston. It doesn't mean they're going to necessarily win, depending on what Houston does, but I think they can definitely cause some problems that Houston's not quite ready for.
Well, Houston, I'm looking at ESPN right now, and at this time, the predictor has 79.4% in favor of Houston, so that's a 20.6% chance that Purdue's got. We talked to Dustin Schutte on Wednesday, and he doesn't think that it's impossible. Now, the chances that Purdue wins, it's always a one seed's always, I mean, not always, but for the most part, always going to be the heavy favorite coming into a game against somebody a 4 seed and lower, so 4 through 16. But Purdue has played well, and they're starting to play well. I wrote an article about the fact that in these first 2 rounds, Purdue played really a great game of basketball both days in Providence, and I really do think that at least this season's team was built stronger for the run in March than it is the Big Ten season, which you take your lumps, you get beat up, and you get put as a 4 seed and maybe misseeded too low because of how you're built. I really just it's partially fandom and homerism, I guess, but I see Purdue as being better than a 4 seed because of what they went through leading up to this point in March.
Yeah, definitely could be the case, and they even were projected to be that high up until they hit their losing streak. So certainly the team they are now could be better than a 4 seed, and if they play like that, then they're in good shape. The thing that worries me is Houston is built like a team that can really exploit Purdue. Houston does not turn the ball over very often at all, which is something Purdue can fall into quite a bit. And rebounding is also a huge thing Houston's known for. Purdue has had their rebounding issues. So the matchup is not great for Purdue, which I think is where you have to start flipping things in your favor that the opponent's not ready for. For one thing, it's going to have to come from more than Braden Smith and TKR in this game. And it has these past couple, but you're talking about McNeese and High Point, who just physically are not the same as Houston. Houston's got athletic guards. They've got a lot of skill. They've got bigs in the post. Roberts is going to be an interesting matchup for Trey Kaufman-Wren down low. He has to stay out of foul trouble. Like, there are a lot of things that are now concerns that really weren't on Purdue's radar when they're playing teams like High Point and McNeese. So they have to find a way to flip some of those scripts and gain some advantages against Houston.
Well, now I will be interested to see who matches up tonight against LJ Cryer. He's the leading scorer for Houston, averaging 15.6 points a game, and he only turns the ball over 1 time a game, so he's pretty safe with the ball. But I would be interested to see if they put, and he's only 6'1", so they could put Braden on him, but will they do something like put CJ Cox on him to where Braden doesn't have to try to, stay with Cryer and prevent maybe Braden from getting in some foul trouble, because not that it's happened often, but he has gotten into some games to where the fouls were an issue for him. And if you've got to guard the leading scorer, who's a leading scorer on a top-seeded team for a reason, so he's pretty darn good, is he going to pose a problem if you try to put your point guard on him, even if he is the point guard? I don't even know if he runs the offense or if he's the shooting guard for the Cougars, but I haven't I've seen them play, but I haven't really broken them down that much. But Houston is a darn good team, and obviously they're a 1 seed. But there has to be for Purdue some game plan, and I don't know, do they incorporate Will Berg? I mean, I know they're going to keep rotating him in to keep TKR out of foul trouble, but will his 7-2 slower speed be a detriment, or is Painter going to jump right into it and say, we've done this for the past 2 games, we're going to keep doing it this week?
Yeah, it could be that he would be a good guy to bring in simply to defend Juwan Roberts. If Berg can play the good defense that we've seen a little bit these last couple of games, because, I mean, Roberts is a good big. Not only is he big, but he's skilled. And then for rebounding as well, like, Berg is going to have to step up in this game, I think, if he's going to play minutes. And but I think at the same time, throwing in a 7'2" guy could really help to handle Roberts because of his size and because you don't want to let Trey Coffin-Rand get into foul trouble. For the backcourt, though, Houston's backcourt is really, really tough because Cryer is good, and you have to respect the shot on all 3 of their guards, basically, that start. But Sharp and Uzan are still really good. Sharp was the Big 12 MVP for Houston, not LJ Cryer. So it shows how good he can be. And then Uzan, too, is just a really tough one-on-one guard. So even if Purdue puts Braden Smith on LJ Cryer and they throw CJ Cox on Uzane or somebody, no matter what, whoever Fletcher Lawyer ends up matched up with is who I would go after if I'm Houston. And Lawyer's going to have to guard one of those guys, whether it's Sharp, whether it's Uzan. And so for a team like Purdue that doesn't have great rim protection and help defense when guards get broken down off the dribble, that's a concern for me because you have to respect the shot, which means the driving lane is going to be a little bit more open. And if you don't have guys back to help shut down those lanes in the post, Houston's going to be able to score inside, which then creates the opportunities on the outside, and Houston can really get what they want. So Purdue has to be able to find a way to handle that backcourt, keep them out of the lane like we talked about all season. Otherwise, they're just going to have a really tough time guarding these guys.
Well, and when it comes to the scoring aspect of the Boilermakers, you're pretty set in understanding and knowing that Smith and TKR are probably going to provide 40-ish points, maybe more, but you can pretty set that that's going to happen. We need a night from Lawyer. He's got to have some not necessarily 20, but we will take that obviously. But some contribution. But then we have to have some contributions from Harris, Heidi, and Colvin when they come off the bench. They've done a very good job the first 2 games. The bench provided 22 points and 22 rebounds against High Point, and then 16 points and 13 rebounds against McNeese. If they can have even the McNeese numbers, that's a huge number coming from the bench. That kind of gives you the alleviation of having to rely completely on what the big 3, basically. If CJ Cox can get a couple of shots to fall, Caleb First, Wilberg, whoever's in that 5th spot other than TKR down low, those are some things that we've really got to have tonight. And Dustin mentioned that they're going to pretty much have to play close to perfect basketball. And that's not out of the realm of possibility, but it's really this is their biggest test, obviously, to the point. And I'm not saying next round would be easier, but this team in Houston is a real big issue with matchups. Even though Purdue's got the height advantage in some of those matchups, Houston's just a really well built, strong team.
Yeah, that is one nice thing. The backcourt of Houston shouldn't have much of a size advantage over Purdue.
Mm-hmm.
But like you said, the quickness, the athleticism definitely causes problems. The overall skill Houston has. It'll be interesting to see how Purdue utilizes their small ball lineup because we saw that more against High Point and McNeese. Cam Heide, Miles Colvin, TKR at the five. That was kind of a dominant lineup, even though they
Mm-hmm.
weren't the starters. And I think it worked because you're talking about McNeese and High Point, who are less athletic, less just physically imposing than a team like Houston. And now that you go up against Houston, okay, do you go back to that lineup just to try and counter some of the size and see if you can exploit some of those weaknesses from Houston offensively, or you're going to be forced to play more of a too big lineup with TKR first, Berg coming in off the bench. I would like to see what would happen if Purdue plays that small ball lineup just to shake things up and maybe find some ways to get some advantages. But it's going to be really scary because Purdue's not going to be able to force turnovers on Houston. They're too good, and Purdue's defense hasn't been able to do that as well, even though I think we did see it a little bit against McNeese and High Point at times, which means they're going to have to force misses. And having their small ball lineup is not a very great lineup for forcing misses, in my opinion. So, yeah, I would like to see them go back to that because I think it's their best athletic lineup and their best just skill lineup they can put on the floor. But I'm not sure that it works against this Houston team.
Well, and one thing that the Boilers have done in the first 2 weeks is last two rounds was they shored up their defense. And granted that it's against lesser teams, but I'm not taking away from who they had to play. But their defense did look a lot better, especially at the rim. You didn't see as many backdoor cuts to the hoop where Purdue had broken down and left their guy wide open. I think they really took into consideration the losing streak where they gave up, what was it, over 130 points in the paint in that losing streak. And then the 6 of 9 that they ended up losing going into this tournament, it was still a problem. But I think that it looks like that they've basically really studied and concentrated on we can't break down defensively, and when we don't, we win ball games because the defense being porous like it was costing the game. I mean, it really was. Especially against teams like Wisconsin, a team when you score 84 points at home, you should be winning a ball game. But when you're breaking down at the hoop and they're getting layups over and over and over again, it's going to lose you the game. And we haven't seen that near as much. And I don't know that I've remembered more than twice that it happened in the first 2 rounds.
Yeah, and a lot of that is positioning, and a lot of that is just being more disciplined, which that should translate to Houston because it's about Purdue being in the right spots. Also, then it comes down to, is Houston going to cause more problems because of their skill? Are they going to be able to get open because of their skill? And because you have to respect some of these guys more defensively. You can't give them as much space.
Yeah.
I certainly think it's going to be a lot harder keeping Houston out of the paint than those other teams.
Sure.
But I agree. Purdue is definitely, their defense is in a better spot than it was 2 weeks ago. And so that gives me some confidence, gives me some hope. But yeah, they have to find a way to handle. I think it starts in the backcourt because Roberts, he's good, he's big, but if he's their main threat, I think Purdue can handle that for sure.
Yeah.
It's Cryer who looked fantastic, at least in the first half against Gonzaga. It's Sharp and Uzan who are both capable of just breaking down their defenders. Like, that's where it really concerns me, especially because you have guys like Fletcher Lawyer who you have to play because they have to be able to light it up offensively.
Right.
But how on earth is he going to guard some of these guys?
Well, and that may be we've seen sometimes where Purdue's done a switch, to where if there's a pick, they're switching, or a screen, they're switching rather than trying to get through the screen, and maybe that's a way of combating that, to where they're trying to get some Lawyer's guy open. If they're switching on it, then it's maybe less of a chance that they can exploit the defensive deficiencies. Because you're right, his value offensively outweighs his detriment defensively, and that's not taking away from how hard he works at trying to be work on the defensive end. That's just his shortcoming, and everybody's got him, and that's is he doesn't play the greatest of defenses. He's there, and he can be a defensive player, but he's not the greatest of ones. So maybe that's a way. The one thing that I really keep falling back on when somebody says, well, Purdue hasn't played anybody like Houston in the tournament. They played Auburn. They played Alabama. Granted, Alabama was at Mackey, but they played them. They played Texas A&M. And granted, 2 of those 3 games I just mentioned were losses. But you know what? The Texas A&M game was a close one, and the one against Auburn was essentially a home game for Auburn. And so I don't think the speed or the bright lights of Houston is going to scare away Purdue in any way.
Yeah, and that Alabama game is crucial. I don't think Alabama was nearly as good then as they are now, but still they were a tough matchup for Purdue with Grant Nelson, Cliff Amore, Mark Sears in the backcourt. Like, Alabama was set up to win that game on paper, but Purdue being at home with the crowd, being a night game, they came out, they played hard, they played more like the underdogs, and they really just took care of business and did something I don't think anyone expected them to do. If they can kind of play a similar type game to that, Houston at least doesn't play their absolute best, because I think if Houston plays their 100%, 110% top-notch game, I think Purdue's pretty much got
I think
no
anybody
chance,
would be cooked against them if Houston plays their top game.
Yeah, so
that's how good they are.
If they can catch Houston on a mediocre night and Purdue comes out and plays like they did against Bama, I think this becomes a basketball game that Purdue's going to be riding it down the stretch. But a lot has to go right for that to happen.
Mm-hmm.
But again, because this game's in Indy, because Purdue's playing like they are, it definitely makes me feel a lot better than I would have 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, and I think the key to tonight's game is going to be hitting the defensive rebounds for Purdue, limiting Houston to one and done, or one to very few. I mean, if they're going to get some offensive rebounds, the ball always bounces that way. But the rebounding difference against McNeese was 29-7 on McNeese's offensive side, which means Purdue over 4 times out rebounded them on their offensive side. So I think that's a crucial for Purdue, is limiting the looks and then also getting the rebounds, limiting the good looks, and then forcing them into bad shots, and getting the rebound when they do. Don't give them chance after chance after chance. And I think that's where excuse me, they have a little bit of a height advantage in the places. I think that helps. Now it's getting into the right position. Yeah, I get that, but I think they've done an extraordinarily good job recently, and they, even in the game they lost against Michigan, they did a pretty decent job on rebounding. Now, we talked about that when they lost, was it had to do with shot amount, but still they did a good job rebounding. So their rebounding is crucial to me against Houston tonight, and it's whether or not they can limit the offensive rebounds for the Cougars.
Yeah, and that's a great point. It's going to be hard enough to force misses on this Houston team.
Yep.
That if you give them second, third chance opportunities, especially with the efficiency at which Houston shoots the ball, because as soon as you get those offensive rebounds, they're spraying it out, they're getting open threes. Houston shoots it really well. They don't shoot a lot of threes,
right,
but they make them when they take them, and offensive rebounds are going to be prime opportunities to hit those threes. That will really kill Purdue from a morality standpoint. Just giving up those threes on second chance opportunities, because that allows Houston to make a run. You take what you thought was going to be a defensive stop, and it turns into a dagger, because those threes really are. Those are the type of things that will sink Purdue. So yeah, you have to rebound, especially against this Houston team that is known for being a good rebounding team. But like you said, this is a Purdue team that has rebounded the ball much better. This is really a different Purdue team than we saw even a week ago, or I should say 2 weeks ago in the Big Ten tournament, which makes it really good, because it means they're harder to scout, because the things you could rely on 3 weeks ago with Purdue. You could rely on being able to do certain things to Purdue. You can't rely on anymore. And you only have a small sample size that you can go back and look at to say, okay, how do we handle this new Purdue team with the way that they're playing? So that bodes well for Purdue. They're going to, I think, be a little bit more of a surprise factor, but ultimately Houston has the horses to win this game if they are able to take advantage of it.
Well, it's definitely an underdog and heavy favorite tonight at Lucas Oil, but it is definitely a doable thing for Purdue. 10:09 scheduled tip-off, TBS, not TNT, TBS and True TV. The 4-seeded Purdue Boilermakers, the 1-seeded Houston Cougars. Grant, the last parting shot kind of idea of what you envision happening this evening.
I do think Braden Smith and Fletcher Lawyer show up to play, and I think that's huge because you think last time Purdue played a 1 seed in the tournament, it was Virginia 2019, and basically Carson Edwards and Ryan Klein had to step up major to give Purdue that chance and really just be unguardable. And so I think Smith and Lawyer come out ready to play like that. Do they play like that? I don't know if they can replicate the kind of performance that like Edwards and Klein had back in that Elite Eight game. But I think they show up, and I think they really make a statement in the way that they approach this game. But ultimately, I think Purdue probably hangs close through the first half, maybe into the second half. I think Houston finds a way to pull away at the end because they just wear Purdue down with their defense and with their just overall solidarity. But I think Purdue is gonna put up a better fight than some people are giving them credit for.
I'm going to go out on a limb. I think you're right. I think TKR and Smith show up to play. I think they make it happen. They get their averages. They do their things that they do. Braden Smith does Braden Smith things. A couple of nice passes, be it to an open Lawyer or a TKR down in the post that gets a bucket, and they get that crowd going. And I think once that happens, they start getting their confidence going, much like they did against Alabama, where it's going to be a close game. I don't think it's a blowout, in that aspect. I think it's a close-ish game, and I think the bench comes through high point style and scores 20, 25 points, gets some good rebounds. The one thing that they do have is they have some height with the people that are coming off the bench with who they're going to match up against, be it Colvin, Heidi. They're going to be some taller-ish guards that are going to be able to go in and get some rebounds, get some putbacks against their defender. Maybe a couple of huge dunks like they had against High Point. That would be something. But I think that with the big three doing their big three stuff in that first, to start out, and then when the bench comes in, they're going to play off that energy that the crowd's giving them. And I think Purdue pulls the upset off. I don't know that it's going to be much of a spread, but it might be 3-4 points by the end of it, because I just think that they've really built themselves the perfect way to make a run in March, and they're going to be the Cinderella of the Cinderella-less tournament that people have complained about into the Sweet 16. I think as a 4-seed beating a 1-seed and kind of after limping into the tournament, they're going to be everybody's darlings except for Tennessee or Kentucky on Sunday.
Yeah, that would be really fun. Definitely could happen. I definitely hope it happens. It's going to be really interesting to see how it plays out, because there are just a lot of different things that could happen with the matchups. And so, I definitely think what you're saying is definitely possible. And it'll be fun to see how Purdue comes in and approaches this game as the underdogs. Again, the feeling of being the underdogs is kind of really nice, because Purdue has been the 1 seed, the team to beat for so long these past 2-3 years. That to come in as an underdog with talent, a team that can still compete with anybody, but a team that's not supposed to necessarily beat Houston. It's just going to be fun to be in that position again.
And I wanted to, before we sign off for this Friday, the one I made an observation, never actually said it to anybody, and I don't know why I didn't. Purdue, those first 2 games, they wore white. They wore their traditional block-lettered Purdue, whereas in the past 2 seasons, they wore their script Purdue white uniforms. Do you think that has to do with the fact that Zach Edey was on the team and now they want to have, okay, we've got a different identity this year, so we're going with the traditional white uniforms, because now they're in black. They don't have a script Purdue black uniform, which I'm almost positive they'll have next year. But
yeah.
But do you think that's something that they actually kind of we want to go with? Because I saw the equipment guy say that he was going to pack the script whites and the other whites and the golds. So do you think it's something that the team decided, you know what, we love Zach Edey, but we got to have our own identity. We're going with the blocks.
It could be because I also noticed that actually that they weren't wearing the throwbacks, which I really like. But
I love
I think they played in gold that first game of the Big Ten tournament, so they haven't brought out the throwbacks all postseason, which usually that's kind of their go-to.
Mm-hmm.
It could be an identity thing for sure, or at least that they wanted to change something up, and they displayed that through the uniform. Ultimately, like, it's just a uniform, but at the same time, it could definitely indicate the mindset of where this team is at. So, it definitely could be, hey, we're a new team. This is not the Zach Edey team of old, or even that era. This is a new era, and we're going to play like it. And it's certainly the way they played has represented that. So I would agree.
Absolutely. Well, enjoy the game this evening. Try not to fall asleep if you do set an alarm for 10 o'clock. That way you can wake up and still not miss any of the game, because it's almost positive it's going to be later than the 10:09 tip. But you set it for 10, you'll be guaranteed to be up before the 10:09 tip-off time. But enjoy the game. Grant, let's come back on Sunday, and do a reaction, hopefully to a win. If not, we'll wait till Monday. But we want to talk about this game, especially if there's a win. So there's a little hint that if there's a W by the Boilermakers on Friday night, look for a special Sunday reaction show, because that means we've got a game on Sunday to react to for Monday, and hopefully a Midwest regional title to talk about and a return to the Final Four. It would be fantastic to see.
Oh yeah, that would be insane. It's going to be interesting. But the thing is, they're there, and if you can get yourself there, then anything can happen, because it's March, and that's the fun of it. So we'll see.
That's the beauty of March Madness, is one game can really, it doesn't matter. One game at a time. You lose, you have an off day, and the other team doesn't. And that goes for Purdue too. If they have an off day, they're going to lose. But the same thing with Houston. If they have an off day, they're playing a team that can beat them and not actually make it look extremely hard if they have an off day. But that's where we're at with the tournament at this point, is that's what happens, is if you have an off day, you're going to get run. So, all right. Well, thank you so much for joining us on this Friday edition of the Boilermaker Lounge. Have fun watching the game tonight, and we'll see you either on Sunday with a win or Monday if the Boilers don't. See ya.